personal tragedy. So with that, I'm going to welcome you. Thank you very much for doing this tonight. And this is going to be a conversation, so I'm going to be asking questions. Okay, I hope you can all see and hear. So first of all, my first question to you is, why have you decided to speak today and here?
I think I asked myself that question about 20 times this afternoon. It sounded like a good idea when we first pitched it. I think people are generally scared of difficult conversations. I see it more and more in my day job in school, where whether it's certain staff members or parents have such a preference from protecting their kids in such a nauseating way that we're scared of ever putting ourselves or other people in a situation which is unpleasant. And I don't think that's necessarily smart. Life is full of unpleasant situations. Conversations that are difficult are always going to be part of our professional lives, whether it's ourselves to our boss or to a colleague or to someone that needs some guidance. That's one thing. I think I want to just make it okay to have a complicated conversation. I don't think that in any way that our family or me doing this is special or brave. I just think when you're in a situation that we are, or we are continuing to be, if you can help someone, then do so. I grew up with a dad who got ill in 1986, born in 78. When I was met, he got meningitis, then ME, and he was pretty much ill for most of my childhood. But yet, when he wasn't in bed, he wasn't in bed for many months, and he continued to work. So he continued doing his job. We even had a hotline from his office into our house, so no one knew where he was. Then even when he was sick, he still looked to help people, and he did that. So I guess as a role model, I grew up with someone who was struggling with their health and living life as a sick person, but who never stopped being there for other people. And I guess that's what it is. It's sort of, that's what I was taught. I was shown that it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you can be of service to somebody else, then just get on and be of service, and not to a place where you're denigrating yourself or not looking after yourself. That would be self-defeat. But if you can cope, even if it's up and down, even if you're going a little bit backwards, but you're not completely falling apart, then be there to help other people. And that's probably what's playing in the back of my head.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I know that it's difficult because I know we've had some conversations, and you said to me, I can't think about that, it's a different headspace. So I think the fact that you're here to give to other people and help other people is great, and I'm sure we're very grateful for that. But hopefully it won't be too uncomfortable for you. Can you tell us about Naftali then, for those of us who weren't fortunate to have known him? What was he like? Okay.
I think there are two parts to his story. When you sent me the questions, that's where I stopped reading. With Naftali, I think in Naftali's head, he was 15 years old. He was almost 16. It's close to sixth form in Jewish grammar. If you would have asked him if he was here now, he would say, "I was stupid." Why was he stupid? Because he was dyslexic and school was difficult. If you would say, "What did I achieve?" Oh, I achieved nothing. He loved his siblings, loved his twin sister. He was my sidekick from 9 years old. He was pretty much always by my side. So he loved his parents. He was loving and sweet and giving. And then something happened. Something changed in those months that we was in the hospital. A whole different Naftali emerged. And I can say that with confidence and with pride, because when we had to go back to that hospital for an outpatient appointment for one of our other kids, a place that I never wanted to go back to, but what do you do? That's a children's hospital. I asked behind the outpatient's desk, were the rheumatology team at work today? I said, yes, was his consultant there, I just wanted to say hi. And some random guy, whether he was a porter or someone very, very junior in the hierarchy of the hospital, said, I remember him. Like, there was a child there that literally affected an entire hospital. And I was completely blown away that some random guy who wasn't part of the clinical team, wasn't on the wards, I didn't recognize him. There was the Naftali that emerged who was, he just grew in stature. Like, his consultant took leave of absence after he passed away. It wasn't just, we saw, like one of the wards we were on, a child was, a young child passed away from cancer. And literally a few hours later, it was business as usual on the ward. It was really hard to experience that. Like the room was cleared out and cleaned, and like someone else went into that room, like in religious language, the angel of death had been dancing a few hours earlier. It was business as usual. And here, his consultant took a leave of absence, and she couldn't do it. The whole place just, when they came to our house during Shiva, and I'm jumping ahead in the chronology, but they came to visit us. The medical team and the occupational therapist came. I think 4 or 5 of them walked in one evening around 7 o'clock. So he would never have believed that that's who he became. Someone who was so self-effacing that somehow him would have an impact on the lives of a whole building and the lives of people who took time out to come visit us. It's almost like prophetic of the last act he chose to do freely when he was out of hospital. He never got to come home once we got into hospital. He went to visit one of his friends who were sitting Shiva because they lost a sibling as well. And it's almost like unnerving, and I can't think of the right word now, that his last act was comforting a friend. When his friends came to visit us in the hospital, he was only worried that he was bothering them. He as we left the ward for the final hours before he was taken down for a second time to intensive care, he was apologizing to the guy next to us that he was disturbing his evening. And I'm so sorry that I'm asking you have to leave the room because he needs an x-ray on the ward. And he just became this I don't know, this wonderful, it's all the positive qualities you can possibly imagine himself. Those few months, he just grew in stature. It's almost, I remember saying at the time, it's almost as if his maturation and his life was on fast forward. And what people achieve in years or in decades, he was somehow achieving in weeks. So like to just reach this perfected state of being a human. Everyone just was impacted by him in a way that you couldn't imagine positively.
I mean, usually you'd expect illness to bring out the worst in people.
No, it was just, it wasn't. He just got more and more sublime, more and more beautiful as a human being, and caring and just wanting to be there. There was no anger. He cried as a Shivala. I'm going back to memories now that I've sort of not accessed, but it broke his heart that he couldn't shake the Arab minimum sukkahs or couldn't come home to the sukkah. That things that teenagers, and just so both on the interpersonal level, he just grew in the most beautiful way, and that impact, I mean, it was felt. I mean, other people came into our ward just to hang out with us. Random mums, they just sat and chatted with him, with us. He had some effect that he would never believe about himself. Afterwards, did we? And I put in my articles I put for the Jewish Tribune newspaper. Only afterwards did we discover the help that he'd given. And then, kids come in from school. How was school today? Good, fine. One or just monosyllabic grunts. Then that's totally normal for teenagers. If you expect any more, I think is unreasonable as a parent. Or you have the other extreme, but they just don't stop talking. So there's no real middle place. We never heard of how he befriended a kid who had come from another school and having real difficult times and could have, God forbid, been a client here had it existed in the past, saved their lives and transformed. People wrote this to us. Boys shared stories that we never knew. He never came home. For him, it was just like, okay, so I'm going up to a kid in the playground who looks lonely and rejected, and I'm going to go and talk to him every single day for months. And we didn't know that. To me, he was my sidekick. He was by my side wherever I went. He came with me. I used to call him my bodyguard. He was 5'10" and strong. And that's sort of, so we're holding on to this split memory of who he was. You know, when he got his GCSEs, we were visiting my in-laws in Florida, a random family trip. No, sorry, he was visiting, went with his twin sister and his big sister to visit the grandparents after the GCSEs. And when the day he got his results, he was so broken because school was difficult for him. We were just so happy he passed every single GCSE. There wasn't no, and it just reinforced the way he felt about himself. And none of the things that he did do were for him anything to be creditworthy until we got all these letters and all these anecdotes from people. So you've actually saved people from despair, and you were there, and your friends. He was the glue that kept his peers together, and some of them have really struggled, regrettably, since he passed away. Both from losing a friend, but not having that glue that seemed to keep everyone together.
Well, thank you. So that's how he coped. That sounds incredible. How did you cope when he was ill?
So let's do the right thing. Let's acknowledge that by and large, school gave me the time that I needed. And where they didn't, and where they're beginning to not realize or not want to realize how serious he was. I mean, we were told he was in the top 3 or something of sick kids in the whole building, so children's hospital. So you get a sense of what that meant, the proportions we were dealing with. So I didn't have to deal with school, so that was good. How do we cope? Well, you've got responsibilities as a husband or wife to each other, so you take that seriously. You know, you want to be there for the other, so we needed to be there. I'm not saying strong's a bad word, because obviously we had fragile moments. We were there consciously to support one another as a husband and wife. We had other children, but we did spend almost every hour between waking up at night time in the hostel with him. We left first thing in the morning, we came back 10:30, between 10 to 11 at night, almost every day for whatever it was, 2+ months that we were there. Shabbos, we took it in turns. Yom Tov, other than Rosh Hashanah, when I was called out of shul from the bimmer, get out of shul now, who's gone into intensive care. And I was the chazan at the time, so that was, other than that, my wife did Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, yeah, she was there as well for that, but Shabbos it was hard for both of us to let go. So, but we have to, you have to make space. No one parent can, I believe, should monopolize on who gets to be with the child. You both want it. Being at home is no easier than being there, and they both have struggles and difficulties. But we did get to spend some good Shabbos together. Then you just want to opt into. There's one beautiful, and I did a voice note about this. Got 2 times. So how do I share? I would share moments that inspired me and felt that. At the time, I didn't know where it would go, so I was still optimistic. I remember with my father. My mum told me on the Purim, a week or so before he was going to pass away, that he wasn't going to make it. I mean, it was Tanit Esther. And you hear it. And my father had been ill anyway for about 4 weeks by then in intensive care in London, and he wasn't awake, and he wasn't going anywhere. But your brain doesn't really deal with it till you have. So it's very smart, something that you can explain it later. But where you go in that, it takes it, but it looks after you until you have to mourn. Because why mourn too early before it's the end? I think doing those voice notes and showing messages and sort of trying to find a positive moment in the day where you go, well, okay, that wasn't such a bad day, because look what we experienced. There was one family, we moved on to a new ward, and it was very difficult. He'd been on a very quiet space in his own room, then transferred to intensive care, then into the high dependency where it was still quite quiet, then onto another ward, and it was busy, and there were kids there who had cancer, and it was very difficult to look at, all children, and it was hard to visually, and we didn't know at that time where things were going to go. So he didn't see himself, or we didn't see ourselves in that bracket. So we walked around the ward looking, and there was one ward for teenagers. It was loud, and they were culturally not sensitive place to be for us at that moment. So when it looked and found a ward that had a young child, Muslim family, and there was just them in the room. It was really quiet. There was one Friday night where I said to him, look down at the floor. We had the curtain between us that was closed. We were both, like a different word, davening at the same time. We were both facing almost the same direction. Yeah, I could see them. They put their rug down, and I was Friday night davening, and I just looked down and just for a moment noticed that. But others, there's a thin piece of curtain, and one person's bowing down, and one person's standing and bowing. And we just sort of shared those moments of how beautiful that there's so much theoretically that pulls us apart, but then we're both in the same place, and we can speak about, inshallah, Bezrat Hashem will get better. And you can speak a language that was common, and those moments that peppered the experience, I think, gave us each those moments. Or there was the man in a high dependency unit that brought around the drinks, the old man. And you think of the pecking order of hospital. You've got the consultants who see themselves as God. Mm-hmm. They walk in, and all the amazing nurses who are the ones doing, they just melt into the wall because the Lord has arrived. And there was one cocky one that kept telling us he will solve the problem. He never came and spoke to us afterwards. Too ashamed that he had overstepped the barrier, where he can actually do. And I didn't really want to see him anymore anyway. But the guy who pushes the trolley for the teas. I mean, if there's any little example of who's really been successful academically in life and who's achieved a high career path and who's just pushing around the treadmill, this man was a righteous man, this milkman, and he looked after us with teas, and he went and got kosher milk for my wife and kids, and he was such a beautiful soul. And those moments, like when you feel when your child inspires somebody to want to go beyond their job to look after you, then those moments as well. So we're really looking every single day for those moments that sort of lifted us up, or whether it was the angel that came from high council to look after us, and to look after our, knowing that there was someone that just dropped in from heaven every day with a little treat, or go out for a walk, if you go around the building, get some fresh air, and I'll stay with Natalie. And it was those moments gave you the strength. Besides probably the mental denial of not wanting to think where it was going. And never really thinking it was going to go that way. We were told, don't look on the internet, don't try and be a doctor. Because what we had was so rare that it is a really bad prognosis. But we try to just abide by that, because why torture ourselves and beyond. So those moments, the positive moments, keep you going.
Make the difference.
Yeah.
And when he did pass away, how did your faith get you through? I presume your faith did get you through. What role did your faith play?
I think at that point, it was just a numbness and a pain that was just so acute, like literally heartbreak. And when I read this, when we all heard last week of the husband of the lady who was killed, his heart literally broke. I was there. It was painful, just unbearably painful. But I guess again, go back to that first answer I gave, it's that knowledge that you've got responsibilities beyond yourself, and you've got to hold on enough. We've all seen the movies where they're barely holding on and they get rescued. And I think I felt that way. I found the Siddur an awful place to be. And the Siddur has texts that are particularly difficult. You speak about, for generation to generation, we will praise your name. Well, one of my generations isn't going to praise your name. And you start reading the Siddur in a brand new way, where all of a sudden words have meanings that you didn't have last week. It was just a sentence. And then I began to think, well, what about the people who never had children? What does our prayer text do to them? And so, and when I avoided davening too much in the Shiva house. I found saying the bracha Rafa'enu, Machaya Meis. Now, so all of us, we read these texts so casually until it literally is what we experience, and we know the answer. We're very good at saying, "Oh, God sometimes says no," quite lovely, but and when we can deal, but it's thank God, it's often not the most painful no in the world. We can deal with didn't get the job, didn't get the raise, didn't get maybe it's just little things, and so it was. We had two people came to our house at the end of the shiva. One was the chief rabbi. He happened to be a Manchester kid. He was actually going to visit Naftali at the hospital. He was coming to Manchester, and I'd spoken with his office. And he said to me he would love to come. And it wasn't about the chief rabbi. It wasn't about him giving my son any particular great spiritual concept to hold on to. I just wanted it for the nurses and the doctors, mainly the nurses, and our particular team, the consultants, were just brilliant, wonderful people. I wanted them to get the chizur. I wanted them to just be uplifted. Like, here's the chief rabbi coming, say thank you to them. And I wanted them to hit him. The timings didn't work out, and he was in school the day after we finished sitting Shiva, and he came straight from King David straight to our house. First, it was very weird that guys with guns were guarding my house. That was just that was a thing. That was just an unusual moment. I mean, he spoke about his own daughter who passed away, and he said something to me. I mean, he was there for quite a while, but the one bit that I remember, and I hope I've tried in some way to emulate this. He said his daughter was very happy, and Simcha was very much part of her life, and he's kept that going in the way that he tackles life, and the way he teaches, and the way he presents himself. And I like that. That's what that idea sort of began to just go into the brain. There was no way you're ready for anything at that point, but just that idea begins. You can't change the reality, but you can channel the energy of that person going forward. And the other was a Holocaust survivor, whose name I can't remember. He also happened to be in Manchester. H brought him over at the time. And he had lost in the Holocaust 150 of a wider family. And he, and I was asking, how do you continue? Obviously, it's very different than his past and present, and he's Baruch Hashem built a most glorious empire of family, and he was the most wonderful man in his 90s. And he gave an anecdote, and sort of the bottom line was, there are answers, but you've got to be in heaven to find them out, and he was in no rush to find out, to go to heaven just yet. And I think, there's stuff to do. Hand on heart, has the thought of getting back into bed or not getting out of bed occurred to me since he passed away? Absolutely. But I never did it. There wasn't one day after I got up that I went back to bed because of it, and I never didn't get up. And that's probably a sense of duty, the duty to the living. You can't change. And so the faith was, I can't understand it. I think we're living at a time when, because of the internet, we think arrogantly, let's use that word, that we have so much access to knowledge today. And almost we demand our right to know everything.
Information.
Yeah, but I'm not that victim. I don't fall into that category of needing to know everything. There are things I'm happy that I don't need to know, and it doesn't bother me if I don't know them. And this, tragedies and sadness are part of life. And there's no suggestion that you categorize what happened to us as not a tragedy or not a sad. It's profoundly as such. One of the heads of my yeshiva, Rabbi Yehuda Amital, was also a Holocaust survivor. And he quoted often to us a verse in the book of Shemot where Hashem says, "V'anshe kodesh tihuni," be holy people to me. And he quoted the teaching of the Kotzker Rebbe. He said, God's got enough angels. He wants us to be holy people. Meaning people who get tired, people who get stressed, people that have emotions. We're not meant to be angels. Angels are in heaven. We're meant to be people, regular people, with the whole gamut of human emotions. And there are times when I feel like I've perfected what Rabbi Nachman calls the silent scream. And there are times when I cry out loud. And the times when it's overwhelming, and times when you can cope. The first Seder night, so he passed away in November. The first Seder night, I got through about 7 seconds of Kiddush until I completely lost it. And then we sort of just, okay, we've got Seder night. Happened to work out it was during COVID, and there was so much literature on how much of the Haggadah you can skip and still tick all the right. I'm not saying you can do that generally. Or you really can, but you really shouldn't. But there are, and knowing what I knew, we did a shorter version of Seder. For some people, it could be a long version, but for our family previously, it was a short version. Yes, we skipped out the 4 sons. I wasn't mentioning the word sons on that evening. And that's anyway not so integral to the telling of the story. So knowing which bits were integral, and then we did a Chabad thing at the end. We didn't sing any of the songs after Hallel. So no, there was no singing that year. That couldn't happen. But ultimately, the first year lost it in the first after 7 seconds. It's overwhelming, just a wave, as everyone describes it, just knocking me down in a way that I just didn't expect. I knew it was coming, but I didn't expect it. And then said, well, I've got other children. It's Pesach. You do it properly. That's the way I was brought up. That you do things right. If something is right, you've got to do it right. And so we did it. And we did a couple of hours, and we did all the mitzvahs. I said, well done, Tofah. And then he said, well done, we did it. And then the following year, cried somewhere else, not in the first 7 seconds. But then Baruch Hashem, this year was easier.
Does it get easier then?
If I contrast bereavement with a parent, bereavement over a child, I can say 6 years down the line from my father passing away, I'm not conscious of thinking about him every single day. And that's normal and natural. Parents are meant to pass away before their children. So I think that's just the natural way humans have, good news word evolves. That's a dodgy word. But I think with a child, it's because it goes against the natural, what we perceive. But it's not really. That's also a truth. On the one hand, we say it goes against the natural flow of life. But I'm on a Facebook group of parents I've lost, and there's unfortunately thousands of people on this group. I'm not talking about Africa malnutrition. I'm talking about regular first world countries, and whether it's America, and that can be done to road traffic, guns or drugs or just accidents. Unfortunately, we say on one hand it's not natural because we think about chronology, but it happens, and it happens all over the place. And there are lots of people, and there's some on that group. I don't really look at it anymore. I used it at first. I found it comforting to be able to express things with people who knew exactly what I was saying and could just say something back, and it was meaningful because they were there, they were in that space. I think we just live in that uncomfortable space, which has just become the new norm. If I compare it to, if you walking in the street and you get a stone in your shoe, so it's hurt. So you might want to keep walking for a bit, or you want to maybe take the shoe off and take the stone out. But if you don't take the stone out, eventually you'll have a dent in your foot where the stone just sits. And for you, that will be the new normal. But if somebody else had that shoe, they'll be going crazy. And I think we're living with that stone in the shoe, which is and that's just become the new norm, which is awfully tragic. But that's where we're at. And then from that point, you then got to then think, well, what can I do in that place? You can either regress, accept it and do nothing, or accept it and try and say, okay, we have dreams. Everyone has dreams, what you want your life to be. No one dreams this, but no one dreams lots of the tragic things that affect people in life. And again, obligations to the living, to yourself, first and foremost. You're no good to anybody if you're not functioning yourself. And to just make that journey, maybe this is also part of what I'm here tonight, just if having awkward conversations is something that I want people to experience, and being agitated is not a bad thing. We can't just mollycoddle everyone and wrap them up in cotton wool. Then having a life which is a bit upside down and saying that's okay and stop wishing it all to be rosy all the time is, I think, a more realistic. Now, somebody wanted to claim, some rabbi that came, that he's going to come back to us in a dream and tell us, "Mummy, Daddy, it's all okay." That didn't happen. when I heard it, I just wanted to like just get out of my house. Just Rabbi, just wherever you are, just take a step and walk out. And that's a dangerous thing. I think some of these spiritual teachings are particularly dangerous, giving people hope or false hope. That's not genuine or real. Could it happen? Yeah, my faith in God allows for those possibilities. But to live every day wondering why God hasn't sent my son back in a dream, I think is awful. Because then somehow people believe this stuff, and then they feel like spiritual failures. Somehow I'm grieving, but I'm not good enough for my. And then that's another layer. Yeah, and I think it's really, really dangerous. Another thing we happen to spot, there's an amazing lady in America, Miriam Ribiat. There's a group in America called Chevras Lone Day, some Mishnayos or something. But they learn in memory of people who can't facilitate it. But this woman has been through countless bereavements. She also lost a sibling who happened to be a twin with a girl. It's uncanny. There are some very uncanny parallels between her story, her parents, sister, like she's lost, and she deals with grief, and she's putting a book together. And she ended up sending us. I just found her on LinkedIn, and we started speaking. And then her father, back in the, I can't remember, it was 80s or 90s, I think 80s, I could be the wrong decade maybe, wrote his feelings. So sometimes reaching out to people who have been through this from the same cultural backgrounds and just discussing things, I think made that, it validated the religious feelings, the frustration. I avoid asking, I can't speak for the whole of my family, but I avoid asking why me. So I don't think that's a question that has an answer, and it doesn't go anywhere. So now the other Rosh Hashiva would talk about the Holocaust and say, you can't ask why did God do? There's lots of reasons. I taught Holocaust theology in the past, but I like his perspective. He said, don't ask why it's happened, but now that it's happened, what does God want from me? And so turning it from anger to something productive is the education that I got, and probably that's where religiously I got that inspiration.
I'm really interested in the things that you tell me that other people said. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was preparing these questions was what people have said to you. Because I speak to, obviously I'm a psychologist in my profession, and I speak to people who've gone through tragedy and bereavement. And some of the things that you've said, other people said it's really upsetting. I've just written some examples. People say, Hashem wanted them back, and they were too good for this world. They must have been really special for Hashem to take them. They've done what they've done their type of kid. They've done what they were here on earth for. And they mean well, people mean well, but, and maybe people here said these, we mean well, don't we? How do you feel about those comments, and what should people say? What can people say? What should people say? What should they do?
So, one of my daughters, Tolly's twin sister, we sat next to each other in the shiva, and some kind person brought us a blanket we could just put over ourselves. And when people said stupid things, we both squeeze each other's hands to say, we know it's stupid, just smile at them, they'll be gone soon. Honestly, I don't mean this, I think it does sound very righteous, but I don't want it to come out that way. When people say things that are inappropriate, use that word, or anything rude, I just look at them and think, thank God you don't know what you're talking about. Honestly, it sounds, I literally say like, Baruch Hashem, you've never experienced, and I hope to God you never experience the pain, the acuteness of this heartbreak, that you'll ever discover how ridiculous what you're saying is at this moment in time. Maybe for some people that works,
yeah.
and that's the real difficulty here. That for some people that will do it for them. I've listened to. I watch a lot of Israeli news, so speaking on Friday morning, last Friday on one of the Israeli channels, was Miriam Peretz, the most amazing woman. She lost 2 children in various wars. She has this tower of strength, Bob. She's good for president of Israel, so she's clearly able to overcome her challenges and put herself in that role. And I find her completely inspiring. Again, as a role model for getting on with things. I prefer not to speak for God. Our texts describe what God does, but I've got no idea. Yes, we were told, because he passed away before the age of 20, that over bar mitzvah, that if he had done anything wrong in those couple of years, whatever he suffered, cleansed, so he's gone, is completely, his soul is the most radiant soul and totally perfect. And I guess a part of me, that's lovely. So like, okay, I was picked to have a champion soul, but then immediately, well, why me? And how does that help me now when I'm grieving and missing my sidekick? But again, I don't ask why, so what can I do about it? So by not asking the question I don't ask, it takes away a lot of that. I think be strong is another one. Be strong. I'm stronger than Popeye at this rate, you know. I know it dates me as a child, but, you know. So yes.
What should people say then?
I don't really know. I think it's such a difficult. People crossed the road or avoided looking at us, not because they weren't there. I think we've come to learn that about certain people who we felt were unjustly absent from our lives. I mean, COVID gave people some excuse because it happened to COVID, but not really, not certain people. And I think recently we've spoken, my wife and I, just made peace with that. Their absence was not a lack of caring or a lack of sympathy. It was, we actually don't know. We don't have, almost as if they're mute, and they don't have the language to say what, and they don't know what to say. And really, there is nothing to say. A good friend of ours turned up Friday after Friday with treats for shelves, dips for salad, pomelos, random things that, you know, like, just putting it out there. And I cut them up, so I get all the hard work and I get to enjoy it. It's like the thickest peel, yeah, grapefruit orange. It was just the unrequested, the spontaneity of just turning up, and we didn't need it. We shopped, we cooked, we never sort of got hold of shovels. Yeah, it was just something little, and it wasn't the cost of the gift. It was just the gesture, and that was just sweet, and it was nice, and it became, maybe after a few weeks, like a little bit awkward, but then it sort of just became part of how we were going to cope with the week, looking forward to the visit. So it was those that felt capable, and not to judge. I think it's, maybe it goes back, maybe my brain's sort of creating a theme out of this, because we don't have conversations that are difficult, because we don't want to feel upset, we don't want to show our emotions on the outside. It's all sort of very hidden. And we apologize in our culture for everything. Sorry, I'm crying. But why should you be sorry you're crying? Some things are just going to trigger that wave of emotions, but actually it's beautiful. If you can cry over somebody's name, like before, question 2, it's because the love is so deep that it's just overwhelming, and the personality is so, it's a yearning that just transcends our vocabulary. Humanity hasn't developed a lexicon of words that captures the depth of it. And so actually the tears make me proud that there was someone there worthy of being cried over. In my other job with Holy Law, I've stood there at funerals. I mean, Agecroft is a particularly complicated place to be, that's where he's buried, but I've conducted services in Agecroft a bunch of times since. And there was one time that I came home and I had to just go to bed, not because there was a person passed away, and literally the family just spoke drivel about Grandpa, and spoke about how he used to take remote control, and cousin Jimmy, you've got his anger, and cousin Becky, you've got his. I'm like, this man lived to his mid-80s, and they stood there in front of his coffin, and there was nothing about the person's life that they could speak about that was meaningful. And I came home, I was like, oh, it was awful. It really upset me that this person had lived all these years and there was nothing there. And I think when if you are so moved over the death of someone, it's because there was something very special there that's gone. And you're mourning that as well, the uniqueness of that life that you would imagine could have achieved so much more. So I think people don't know how to speak. Someone will say it wrong. If they're going to say it wrong, you've got two options. You can either be angry at them and fall out with everybody, just be bitter. There's no, what does that help? That doesn't help you. Being bitter just makes things worse. Or you can just say that thank God they have no idea what they're talking about, and give them a bracha that you should never know what this is like, and realize that they're trying. The people who cross the road, again, you can either be bitter or believe that they feel inept. They don't know what to say, and maybe deep down they just cry with you, or that maybe that they're also broken, and it's so painful for them to talk to you that they can't do it. And we do believe, that Hashem, whatever this means, and it's just me, but Hashem gives you what you can cope with. So let's just go with that for a moment. So go for that headspace. Hashem gives you what you can cope with. So the other person is grieving, but they weren't given that challenge. They're just grieving by association. So they really can't cope with it. So how do we expect them to be able to deal with that in the way that I'm dealing with it? So maybe that they need more help until they can cope. And so those that are through it, got the strength to help from Hashem to get through it, to get up. I mean, waking up each morning during Shiva, to have to go downstairs to welcome people for Shacharit in my own house, it was like Groundhog Day, but in a really bad place. And it was that those experiences were hell. But we got up. It wasn't by the end. So something must be going on in a spiritual sense that you don't know it at the time, but you're given something that enables you to function. Now, that could be that it was upbringing. It could be, and I do look back and think maybe some of those experiences in my formative years that I needed to be strong. I needed to dig into myself to cope with a situation, created in that moment a stronger personality that didn't know existed. I didn't know existed, but no one could know that it exists. And maybe all of us sort of have that capacity, but I pray that no one has to be the strongest person.
Amen. When you talk about functioning and being strong and afterwards, how did you go back to school? I mean, you're in a job where you're surrounded by 14
teenagers
and 15-year-old kids.
Yeah, that's one of God's sense of humor moments. I always put it that way. That's me being polite to God. Yes, it would have been easier to go back to a desk job.
Yeah.
So we finished Shiva, and then we waited at home during the first month. We didn't really do too much. All of us were just at home. And then I said to everyone, January, we're all going back to our normal lives. It's enough. We can either be hermits forever. I mean, even before that, back in Shul, at the time I didn't really appreciate it. Rabbi Chazan, bless him, pushed me to continue my job as the Chazan in Shul. Now, benching Rosh Chodesh has the word Chaim, quite a lot in that. And there was I, less than 2.5 weeks of leaving my son, davening about having a month full of life, a life. Now, I do a little trick, which whatever it is in psychology, when it gets overwhelming, I usually take a nail and just sort of push it down onto my thumb. Then the brain goes ow, and it sort of knocks it off the thoughts. And I think I prayed the whole prayer doing that. But I got through that. I mean, he wanted me to go back to begin the process of healing. And the only way I was going to do that process of healing was by getting back into the rhythm of life. And I pushed myself, and he encouraged it to do that. Then I remember during that first month, I would also give out certificates or treats when it's a kid's birthday. And there was a kid there. In Shul. Celebrate all the youngest kids, their birthdays from like 0 to 12-year-olds. And there was a kid with the name Naftali. And then there's people, there's a family in Shul, and older gentlemen, whose father has exactly the same Hebrew name as my son. So like, when they get called up for Levi, and I hear the words Naftali Meir, it's like, whoo, every time they get called up, it's like, but that's that unpleasant balance. And I know from them, they made a comment, again, I don't know if they still remember the comment, but they felt uneasy by their fathers. It's like they didn't like their own name now because it was in his early months, it was complicated. But we got on with things. And then I said, right, I'm going back to school. No point in December. I wasn't going to sit in a class in silence watching kids do winter exams. There was no value. And I went in one time before just to get back into the building. I sat in the car park, just flooded tears. But I'm like, okay, let's do this. Wipe the tears away. Got out of the car. And colleagues are very precious. You've got some amazing colleagues at school. I had to fight off the desire to hug me, some of the female colleagues. Arm strokers.
That's interesting though, because they're trying to, they haven't got the words.
No.
So which we want to give those.
Yeah, the nurturing, it was beautiful. No, it was just, yes, correct. When we've had students pass away in school, one from transplant, whatever, over the years, and somehow it fell on my shoulders to go up and hold the school on my shoulders with no training by them, given that job. It sort of came back, the love that I showed, I felt very, very nurtured. But there were days when some of those less than lovely teenagers, I looked at them thinking, right, what's the point of your life? Yes, there were some moments where I got very angry internally and thought, you're so disgusting, you're so rude, you've got no dignity to others, you're just rude to your friends and rude to the adults in the room. And it's like, my son was just an ordinary kid, and look what he achieved. And that wasn't very helpful. That was in the early days. Those thoughts again are not very helpful. Might be natural, expression of emotions, but definitely not helpful thoughts. And there were, it was difficult. But again, the sense of, as the Torah commands us, "V'charta b'chayim," choose life, that I believe echoes through the books of the Torah. There's that passage right at the beginning of Shemot where the midwives don't kill the babies. The Pharaoh wants to kill them, but says, they cause the children to live. And that sense that the Torah is called the Torah of life. I thought, well, yeah, I don't have my son, but let me try and give over. And in my talks in school, for sure, I'm channeling some of that energy.
You do a lot of these podcasts.
Yes, and the messages that I give over, it's the sense of reaching out to each other and being there and being sensitive to the needs of others, all the life that he had, the hidden life that we didn't know about him, and then the character that emerged in those months in hospital. I speak about that, and I don't always speak about it frontally and include his name in the conversation, but I think I'm channeling that type of personality. It was such a beautiful personality. And again, that sense that the hospital grieved over him, and the cards we received from some other nurses, thinking now the cards we got from the other nurses on the ward who couldn't come to our house. They saw death on that ward. That was a oncology ward, a rheumatology. They saw horrible things, and to try and encourage others to be a bit more like he was. So it's a mission. It's a mission. It's not always easy, and I think it's even harder today. COVID has definitely impacted our teenagers in ways that will emerge more and more as the data as people do research and data comes out. Some of them are really struggling with personal skills, resilient, like a lot of these things. We had this pandemic in school with weather is boiling hot outside, or the sun's shining, it's not cold. The kids are wearing puffer coats, which is basically an adult version of a comfort blanket. Because they've put all their duvets all day at home. And they've all become ADHD hyperactive fidgeters. Like, it's not normal. They've all created needs that didn't exist. So they've got issues. I mean, these are going to be adults that can go into the workplace needing to doodle every hour of the day. It's not. And so there's a lot to do. We've got to save And they've got to save humanity from where we're at the moment with our teenagers and bring them out and give them the confidence and say it's okay to be fragile. It's okay to reach out, look after each other. You're not less of a guy if you're sensitive to other people. You're not less of a person for noticing people's pain in the playground and saying, can I help you? So trying to channel that. But there are days when, like he did. But there are days when it's
keeping an eye on the time.
Days when it's very difficult and very complicated.
Just just keeping an eye on the time, making sure that I've got so many things I want to ask you. Just on the subject of the teenagers in school, the work you do in school and the mental health that you're talking about. We see, obviously, at JAM and through my private practice, young people with the sorts of mental health problems you're talking about, more after COVID. And unfortunately, some young people do want to take their own lives. Some of them attempt to take their lives. Some of them self-harm. And it's interesting, actually, why you talk about the thumbtack thing, which is some people, I'm not saying it's self-harm, it's a good alternative to self-harm, but people do that as a distraction or as a way to have a pain they can focus on rather than the pain in their head. But I just wonder how you get your head around this idea that there are some people the same age as Naftali who want to take their lives and he wants to live. How do you reconcile yourself to that?
Just with love towards those people. I don't think anyone can, if someone's in pain and they want to escape, to leave where they're at, not everyone has a dynamic in their lives that they feel they can talk to anybody. It's just, it makes sense. It makes sense on a human level. If you're talking about a religious level, the concept it doesn't start for me. It's on the Jewish spiritual teachings, body and soul separate. The Neshama is fully aware of what's going on and is stuck. It doesn't go anywhere. It continues to. It doesn't know it's dead. It doesn't know where it's going, and it's awful for them. And that's yes, that's in the Jewish mystical teachings. It's not a simple thing at all. Someone passes away at the right time. The soul's on a journey. They take their life. From the spiritual teachings, it's very complicated. But on a human level, if you put that to one side and don't look through that prism, I can understand. Life is very painful and very bleak for many people. I think the education system does not help. I think school is an awful place for lots of people. That it's just it pushes them down. I don't know what the correct. I don't think there is a correct structure for a school. For example, schools that stream by ability, the weakest members define themselves as being doomed to failure, and that they just label themselves and then they don't try. So it's self-fulfilling prophecy. The brighter kids could have the other experience. They're so pressured, and then the fear of failure. There's so many students answer a question with the words, "I'm probably wrong, but." Now that's a genius response to a question. It means they're always going to be right. If they give the wrong answer, "I told you I was going to be wrong," they completely shield themselves from ever being wrong. And if they were right, well, no one's going to remember that I was probably wrong, because they're going to be praised for what they've just said. So they protect themselves. There's a total fear on both sides of the spectrum. The middle ones just sort of muddle through and they can go in either direction. There's a tremendous amount of pressure for young people today. When I used to walk past a non-Jewish school, that was Magas in Hendon, coming in from Hasmonia. So what did happen when I went to school in the late 80s and early 90s? You had 20p or 25p in your pocket. You bought the Mars bar from the kids in the playground that were selling. Okay, now you've got hundreds of pounds worth of gadgets on you. There's a responsibility there that weighs on their shoulders. There's so much more in life that challenges young people. That we brought our children up a certain way. Our own background gave us certain perspectives, my wife and I, and maybe we could do whatever job we did with our children. And that gave Naftali his ability to respond in that way. Other people, you have to know. I think maybe I do the mental health things because I'm sensitive to their pain and aware of it. And I've seen it. I've seen, one of the wards it was on, there were teenagers there that you just think they're so desperate to live because their lives have been put on pause for sickness. And they would give anything just to be normal. And they just need, no one needs judging, and no one needs to be questioned in that way. If someone's in that place, and rather than asking, how can you contemplate that? So what can we do to stop you feeling that? To me is the only question. And and if God forbid it goes in that awful place, then again, no judgment, no questioning. It's most natural in the world. What could I have done? Parents, families. Sometimes there is nothing to do. Sometimes that's part of this, the tragedy of existence. It just, it's just, yeah. But it hurts. It hurts to think that anyone could be in that place. Maybe the people that Naphtali helped, if not for him, could have been in that place. So get that sense of pride, but just being aware of how precious life is, and to speak about the gift of life. And if that doesn't resonate with someone and they don't look happy with hearing about the gift of life, then you've got to pounce on that and say, well, what is it about life that doesn't fill you with some optimism or some sense of being greater than whatever you are at the moment? And then flood their lives with help and support as much as possible. Knowing that it's not always possible. It's tragic.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to a slightly different topic now. So a lot of people that I work with, yeah, it's a good idea to pause. Let's take a breath.
It's just we have an hour. Okay.
So it takes time. We can all talk amongst ourselves. Are we all right with you? It's inevitable, it's all right.
Go. Ask your questions.
Yeah, so obviously I work with people with mental health problems all the time, and a lot of people, especially when they've got problems or they're miserable, they're depressed or whatever, low mood, it's a very common theme is that people feel they don't have the right to be unhappy, and they feel guilty, and I'm sorry for taking your time, I'm sorry for bothering you, and I'm sure there are people with worse tragedies and worse people, and I've even had the occasional client who might have even mentioned your situation and say, well, compared to what Rabbi written, I've got no right to feel like this, but they do. I just wonder, what's your take on that? How do you, can you still sympathise with people who have, their worries seem so irrelevant or small compared to what you've been through, or their problems?
Okay, so let's confess openly in this public forum to a misdemeanor. I was conducting a funeral in Agecroft, and it was irritating me that the mourners were losing perspective. So whilst they were filling in the plot, I just popped over to where my son was buried and stood there for a few minutes. And when I came back, they were much better behaved. I think someone must have told them to get a grip. There's a 90-year-old versus a 15-year-old. Now, that's not entirely cheeky of me, because there is a story in the Talmud where one of the rabbis, 2,000 years ago, it was quite common, lost 10 children and took the bone of whatever of his final son to comfort others, to say, everyone can, I'm here to look after you. Again, no one can judge. No one can judge the impact of a loss or of a moment of grief or a perceived failure and the impact that has on anybody. I've gone to Shiva houses and I've been empathetic and sympathetic, and I generally felt sad for the family that's lost a relative out of the age. So an emptiness in their life, and what I know is that the emptiness will be easier to cope with over time. But right now they're feeling that feeling of being bereft and having that gap in the heart, and that's where I take myself. I'm there. If I'm doing a job that's there for other people, then it's not about me or weighing up my loss against their loss. It's individual. I think still as a society, we do get embarrassed by our perceived lack of being strong men and women. And I don't know how that's going to change, because you don't want everyone going on to the thing and blabbering away the whole time to like, we're kind of a society of all the time pouring out their hearts, because resilience demands that you've got to know the right limits of showing emotion and being able to function. And if all we're doing is all the time expressing ourselves, and that's probably not so healthy either. Whatever anyone's going through, they need someone to support. If my I would hate to imagine that my presence would make someone supporting them at a funeral or an unveiling, whatever it might be, would be perceived by the family as actually adding to their grief, because they now feel awkward expressing themselves. But thank God, as far as I'm aware, I've done quite a few since November 19. There was a stage where I couldn't say the bracha anymore, going to the cemetery. I've been there like crazy amounts for various things. People, whatever people are going through, they need support. And if I can support them, I'm available, and I'm there to support them and to help them understand what they're going through is their moment. They have every single right. People should realize that. You know, it's okay. It really is okay to feel weak, to need help. But we do. Maybe I wouldn't be saying this if what we went through hadn't been of such magnitude. And I can feel confident saying it because it's one of those experiences that nobody wants to go through in life. Like really, no. Like, you could justify losing your job, or I'll find something else, and that's okay. But there's no replacement in this one. It's a finality. And you know, just now for our daughter's wedding, which was just over there. So it's nice to be back. Just over a few weeks ago. You know, my wife and I promised ourselves this was her wedding, and this wasn't about who isn't there. It's about what's happening with our oldest child and the gorgeous guy that she married. And I'm proud of the way we did that. It was absolutely draining afterwards. In 2 weeks afterwards, we were still completely shattered. Not because late nights, that's irrelevant, but just the emotional toll of having to push the natural feelings of grief and wanting to talk, wanting to say, we didn't know. And she felt it. People came away, those that came from London, said that was a really happy wedding. That there was the potential for it not to have been a happy wedding. And so we promised ourselves to know it's got to know when to focus on the grief, know when to be happy, and that it's okay to take a night off. We're not worse parents for not making it the focus of the wedding, and we're better for it. And that juggling act is what we've started to make part of our life. You know, only God, and I mean this like with deep humility to the one above, could have brought together this concoction of having the Sefer Torah ceremony in memory of our son, which was booked a few months before my daughter started Shidduchim. So that was Shabbos was the offer in Golders Green. We drove back after Shabbat. Sunday was the Sefer Torah. The end of the week was Pesach, and then there was the wedding. Now, no normal person, and I really mean that, no normal person would put together emotions that take you in such drastically different directions, all in the space of a few weeks. I guess I can drive the most sane person insane just by itself, and let alone all the other things we've got on either side of it. But that juggling is also okay. Like, it's okay, I think, to do that. And not when you're feeling low, to feel low. And when you're feeling happy, to be happy, and that's not a contradiction. To live in that balance is fine. I think I had a teacher once that, you know, that there's amazing verses in Kohelet, Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There's a time for this and a time for that. This concept, you know, don't worry, be happy. He said, no, we're not human beings, because that sort of suggests a static mode of existence. We have to be happy, that we're human becomings. And I love that concept, because you have to then become whatever feeling or whatever mode is appropriate in the situation. And I think if we moved away from the sense of being as a static mode of how we have to live our lives and how we have to perceive ourselves and how we want other people to perceive us. Oh, that's always the intellectual one, that's the happy one, that's the thespian one, that's the sport. And move away from that one dimension sense of identity. It's actually, this is a human being, and at times they will be this, becoming, and at times they'll become happier, at times they'll become the dancer, and at times they'll become the person sitting on their chair. That's okay. So I think we need a more complicated, a more nuanced sense of self and identity, and to redefine identity for the masses. So, I mean, to have a hybrid, you know, we have my son-in-law, such a cute way of speaking. He got a new car, and he told me it's one of these, you know, they existed. It's a hybrid between automatic and manual. I have no idea why you want to bother with the clutch if it does it by itself, but anyway. But maybe that's what we need. We need to have a hybrid sense of identity for all of us. Think about the things that make up our lives and say, I'm going to become whoever I want to, and this is who I am. I'm this conglomerate of aspects, rather than just having to be the one. And then that will be okay. Then we'll all be fine, because we'll just become different parts.
I like that. Did you find it hard to accept the being happy, you know, afterwards? Was it something, a lot of people feel guilty to be happy? You talk about that a lot, happiness.
Yeah. No, but it's one of those cliche things that I'm trying to avoid tonight, but that cliche of person who passed away wouldn't want you to mourn forever, which is a true thing. No, if he knew that he was going to be, he didn't know. Well, there's a lot of pain and said some things. Maybe he had some sense that he was, but we didn't know. When he went down to intensive care because he had breathing difficulties, which was eerily similar to what then became COVID a few months later. But we then were told that it would be advisable to put him into an induced coma. We didn't know that would be there. That would then never come around from that. But I don't reckon. But I know if you would have said to her, he would never have said to her, "I want to be stabbed." So again, I think it's about honoring his life. Honoring him is being happy. Honoring him and projecting his energy and his essence, which in some strange way keeps us connected to him. I think it's about continuing and rebuilding, and again, that sense of obligation to our other children. They can't, otherwise we're just creating a family of victims. And one thing, they are victims. My youngest child, when my daughter moved to Golders Green, almost went through a bereavement again, because he shared a room with Naftali, and then the one thing we did straight after Shiva, I couldn't really go into the bedroom, but took a very, very deep breath, and we just dismantled the bunk bed and just got rid of it. Like that visual there, we needed just to redefine that space urgently. Then we got painter. We just did something to change the look of that space. But he'd been with his brother. Then brother was gone. Then now his sister's moved to Golders Green. That could define the other children just as victims of a bereavement, and then happy things to move away. But we want them to seize life, to build, to have their own families, to grow up and be happy, because we owe it to them, and they and who knows what they will do for society or humanity. So, on the broader sense, and I think the most remarkable, and I mean this with all love for all my children, but I think his twin sister, who has gone through something that even I can't understand. The twin thing, I used to watch them on Shabbos walking in from shul together, and there's disapproving stares from certain members of the further to the right community who thought, oh, boy and girl talking in the street, because they had this, they didn't know they were siblings, and they were so close, and they would nudge each other, and they were literally like, they had this twins. I can't explain it. There was a love there that transcended everything. There was an anecdote, I can't remember which way around, my wife would tell me about it, it's probably the wrong way around. But when they were in kindergarten in Jewish day, 3-4 years old, one of them the teacher had used a glove or a scarf for some winter display, and one of them went, that's my brother, that's my sister, and took it back. Like they had this bond that just went beyond logic, or went beyond everything. The fact that she is so driven, such a remarkable young woman, and is channeling her grief and her energy, her emptiness, that is more profound than us as parents. And I can't, we look and we see when she's in pain, but she's seizing every opportunity to be the best in her education. Like she's got to go up to 7, and learn pharmacy and be the best in that realm. And the inspiration that she got from seeing how the clinicians and the pharmacists in the hospital tried to get him a medication that was unlicensed on a trial thing, on a compassionate grounds from Switzerland, and all the discussions and the ethics and that she wants to use her pain to do good. That's that's incredible. And I believe some of that is her, and some of that is the way my wife and I have conducted ourselves since, in that sense of choose life, let's keep going. So people shouldn't feel guilty. People should just, if they should feel loved, reach out. We can talk about it, we can share. I'm completely mad. I was sent to a Shiva house straight after I finished using Shiva. I can't remember, it must have been Fataldi. So yeah, someone had a Shiva house and I had to go from shore. Which Meshuggah does that. But I guess Hashem's got plans. And I just went as if it was a moment. But again, I think my parents taught me this. Look out for people you can help and just go and do it. People talk about free will and determined. I don't think I've chosen this. I think it's something that I was shown as a child, and it's natural. It's just the way that I was taught. I can't take credit for what I was taught. It just is.
Some things you have chosen, for example, joining JAM. Why did you get involved in JAM? You're a trustee at JAM. You've chosen to do this evening. You have chosen those things. Why have you decided to do that?
I've been teaching for 20 years and I'm so tired. But anyone got a better job offer? We'll talk. I've got till 31st of May.
I think there'll be people who are very upset if you leave.
There are teenagers are a fascinating species, subset of the human race in and of themselves. Somewhere between child and a human. There's just this thing called teenage. And the truth is that some people are fantastic educators, but lousy human beings in understanding. They're good at teaching information and getting a grade out of a person, but they're not good at the human touch. And I see it. I see struggle and see pain. Kids choose to talk to me, and Baruch Hashem, my colleagues as well. They talk to us as the rabbis in the school. And recently, we've got a few non-Jewish kids in our school, Christian, like probably not like people who halakhically questionable, but Christian kids in the school, because we've got spaces and the local authority gave these kids. And these Christian girls are talking to me as well. Like they're coming up to the rabbis to share their problems. You can't ignore that. You can't ignore the struggles and difficulties and the faces. And I have a sense sometimes in a school, it's all about looking at a behavior and judging it to either be good or bad, without the holistic sense of why is someone doing that? What makes them act in that way? And it's that question that intrigues me and animates me, and I hopefully bring it to sort of look at a child differently. And also the adult world, through my short job, being there and listening to people, the adult world, sharing challenges and asking for advice and guidance. If me being part of this makes it accessible for another human being, whether it's because I've got the title rabbi or they feel safe because they know me from school, that's a good thing. If it can open up a conversation with somebody, they won't, God forbid, hurt themselves or suffer in silence, and then just pass on that grief to the next generation. And we speak about children of Holocaust survivors and some of the struggles they might have because of the unspoken pain and suffering that the generation before had. If people who are suffering today don't get their help, and then they somehow get through and fake it and have relationships, but then that comes out either in marriage and the breakdown of a family, or the next children. If I can make it reasonable or acceptable, good, whatever, different, then probably it's another way of helping. It's another way of saying, come on, it's okay, it's kosher. It's kosher to need help. It's kosher to want to ask for help. You're not alone. With the rabbi brain on, you'll not know. It's not good to be alone. Was the first negative in the Torah. Yeah, that's the very first thing God said as a negative, the whole story. So yeah, it's not good to be alone. And hey, you're not alone. If you want to speak to someone, that's okay.
Well, we're very grateful for your involvement here, and that's an asset to Jam. But we are coming to the end. I just want to leave with a final question, really, which is Naftali's legacy. What do you want Naftali's legacy to be, or what is it?
I think his unassuming love. People like to, I'm part of the same era. Social media prompts us today to share everything. I have a gorgeous sixth form class in the morning. The boys do their thing, and the girls take selfies and look at themselves in the mirror, and then they have to post their early morning selfie. And I heard of a new one this week. I can't remember the platform's called, where they take pictures and share like moments of their day with other people. So we're all living in this crazy world where you've got to tell everybody everything you're doing and get everyone to like it. Otherwise, you're somehow deficient and not a successful human being unless everyone likes what you posted. Well, there he was in his own quiet way, literally saving people's lives, helping, being there, being the glue that holds people together. With love and without bragging, and with just this unassuming, pure nature. I think I would like to try and channel that. So just it doesn't need to be public like tonight. If it can help somebody, to go ahead and do that. But in the rest of the life, just to be there quietly, to guide people and support people, and to look out for people, to put people in the center of everything that's being done, to bring out the best in others. And whilst you're doing that, you ultimately succeed in bringing out the best in yourself.
It's a lovely way to end the session. So I'd really like to thank you. Thank you. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought, a lot of inspiration, really. I've been challenged, and it's made me think a lot. I'm sure everybody is the same. Just a reminder that if anybody is struggling with their mental health, whether relative tonight or not, or you know people who are, please get in touch with Jam. Our next In Conversation will take place, Bezrat Hashem,